Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Craftcast, the Freemasons podcast, the official podcast of the United Grand Lodge of England. Chaps, it's great to be with you again. How are we?
Doing really well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
But how are you really?
Good, actually. Yeah.
Very
Thanks,
good.
James. Stephen, how are you?
Busy, but good. We've just
Always.
launched the District Grand Lodge of Gibraltar website.
Yeah,
fantastic. Yeah, definitely a big win for our district. So I've been very busy with
Bit of a labour of love for you, that, isn't it?
Yeah, been a very busy time. But it's been, as you say, it's been a labour of love. It's been great,
Not
very
to
interesting.
mention doing your master's degree at the same time.
Yes, obviously
A
that
minor
took priority.
detail.
Yeah.
Detail. Yeah, no. Well, chaps, it's great to be with you as always. We do have an interesting guest joining us today, Frank Tiller, who is a London Freemason, who has a very, very interesting story to tell about his battle with prostate cancer and his work afterwards with a charity called CHAPS to offer prostate screening across the country. And obviously, because of the demographic of our membership within UGLE, we are keen to give Frank the opportunity to come in, tell his story, talk about his experiences, especially seeing as this podcast is going to be released the day after International Men's Day. And prostate cancer, we think, is a topic that, as men, we don't talk about enough.
And I think particularly important to mention is that it's not just relevant to those in a risk age group. You know, I think this is an interesting topic to people, more our age as well, partly because we have family members who are older and who are in that risk age group.
And being in the period of International Men's Day, we just thought it was really appropriate to start with this for season 2, our first full-length episode. It's a super important topic. As Stephen says, it can affect anybody, either through awareness or through diagnosis. So being an organisation, UGLE, made up of male members, we hope that those listening, whether you're a Mason or even if you're not a Mason, find this conversation useful and informative and perhaps even a call to action in some cases.
Absolutely. And it's important also to note that Frank, as he says himself, I'm sure he'll share this shortly, isn't a medic. He's going to be speaking about his own personal experiences, but we're going to speak about numbers and all sorts of things, statistics and whatnot. But as Frank will describe, I'm sure, we're looking at around an average of sort of 5% of prostate screening tests coming back with a red score, which means that you need to basically go and visit your doctor for further investigation. 5%, if we entirely unscientific calculation here, but if you take 175,000 UGLE members, that's 8,750 Freemasons who potentially are walking around with a high PSA score.
It's 2 provinces worth of Freemasons.
2 provinces worth of Freemasons. So, without further ado, I think we should hear Frank's story. What do you think, chaps?
Yeah,
Definitely. Let's
go. So Frank, welcome to Craftcast. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Could you just start for us and the listeners by giving a bit of an introduction, who you are, your connection to Freemasonry?
It's not so much a connection, but more of embedded, really. I joined Freemasonry 42 years ago when I was initiated, and it's been a very interesting journey in Freemasonry. I very much enjoy it. I recommend it for all those that are listening today that are not Masons. And I am here today, really, to explain to listeners about prostate cancer in general, awareness of it in particular, and more particularly prostate cancer screening and the benefits thereof.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you with us, Frank. I mean, genuinely, obviously, in the job that I do, and even as hosts of this podcast, we get to meet a lot of fascinating and interesting people who have very interesting stories to tell. But I think having met and discussed this with Frank previously, it was an issue and a story that I think most people who are listening will have some sort of awareness or connection to cancer or know someone who has suffered with cancer. And I was particularly touched listening and talking to Frank about, your story and your own experiences, which then obviously leads us to where we are today and talking about prostate cancer screening and all those sorts of things. So, Frank, I wonder if for the benefit of the listeners, you could give us an overview of your experience and how you got to where you are today doing what you're doing.
Okay, so it goes back really to 2019, late 2018, early 2019. My GP contacted me to say they're most apologetic, but they hadn't done a standard blood test for me because I'm on other medication, statins, etc. When you get to a person of a certain age. And when I was working annually, I had an annual medical, of which part of it was having a PSA test. And I said to my GP, could I please have a PSA test? I haven't had one for 18 months, maybe more. And they said to me, are you having any issues, any symptoms? I said, no, I just would like to have it checked. And they were pushing back a little bit and said, well, you don't really need it if you haven't got any symptoms. I said, well, I still would like to have it checked because I worry about these things. And they said, do you have any family that have had anything to do with their prostate, any issues? I went, no. And they said, well, leave it. It's not a problem. I said, no, if you don't tick it, I'm going to tick it as I go to the reception and hand it in.
Yeah.
They said, okay, well, we'll tick it. And they ticked it. And 48 hours later, I get a phone call saying, could you please come to the surgery because we have had an abnormal reading on your blood test. I said, okay, fine. So I went back and I said, what was it? I said, it was your PSA. It spiked because your last reading was 4.09 and it is now 6.73. Their numbers I'll never forget. And I said, oh, what does that mean? I said, well, you would have to go to a urologist because you might have prostate cancer. And I went white.
Yeah.
And I'm on my own there. And I thought, well, what's this all about? So I went to the local hospital. Well, first of all, I made an appointment to go and see a urologist, which took a couple of weeks. I went to local hospital, saw the urologist. They gave me a digital rectal examination, which I've had many of them in the past when I went for my private medicals from work. This one was particularly awkward, wasn't very pleasant and somewhat painful. And it's been the only time that's ever happened. Mm-hmm. And they said, we can feel a nodule. I said, and what does that mean? And they said, I'm pretty sure it's cancer. Well, my wife was with me. I went out. It was a hard time holding back the emotion to get that word cancer told to you. It's very difficult. And if you feel as though your world's about to collapse. And of course, I knew nothing about the prostate. I knew nothing about prostate cancer. I was totally and utterly ignorant. I didn't even know what it was all about, what it's for, why this is happening to me. I decided after years and years of paying for Bupa and never using it, this was the big one, I'm going to use it. So I then just switched to private. And I saw a very, very nice consultant, Mr. Timothy Briggs. He's retired now. He was lovely. He was lovely to both my wife and I. And he went through all the issues. And he said that whilst the PSA test itself is not conclusive, what we would have to do is we'd have to do an MRI scan, which they did, and that proved conclusively that there was a growth in my prostate.
Right.
But he knew exactly where it was from the MRI scan, and then the following week I went in for biopsy, and he did a biopsy, and it was an aggressive cancer. So things were not getting any better; they were just getting worse at every next stage. And then, I say we, because it affects my wife as well, we had to make a decision whether to have a radical prostatectomy, which means removing the prostate completely, or what I call going the chemical route, which is either hormone treatment, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, brachytherapy. There's lots of different therapies for prostate cancer, all of which had to be explained to me, by the way, because one doesn't know.
No.
The medics do. I'm not a medic. I didn't know. And interestingly, I'd like to thank thank my wife Sandra, she was brilliant at this. Because I can't think straight, always take somebody with you, because they can take notes and they're listening to what I can't listen to. But she turned around to Mr. Briggs, who is a surgeon, and said, Mr. Briggs, if this was you and you'd been given this diagnosis, what would you do? Would you have the surgery or would you have the alternative? He said, well, I'm a surgeon. He said, it's the quickest way to get rid of the cancer. It has a very a success rate of more than 75%. The survival rate is more than 10 years. I would do that, no questions asked. But he said, but don't make a decision. Go and see an oncologist and get their point of view. You have to do that. So I went to an oncologist and he went through the whole process. And it wasn't very, but there's lots of side effects of it, because with radiotherapy, apparently it can fuse the prostate to your, I can't think of the name of it, it'll come to me later. But anyway, it will cause a joining of something which is never to be unjoined, and then you can't have surgery.
Right, okay.
So that was the point.
Yeah.
And then, so Sandra said to him, given the current circumstances, if you were in Frank's situation, what would you do? And he prevaricated, he hummed and he hawed, and he just would not commit. And we walked out of there and I said to Sandra, he'd have the surgery, wouldn't he? So she goes, we're having the surgery. So that's what we decided to do. We had the surgery. And the surgery, it was done by robotics, and not that I saw any of it because I was out for 6 or 7 hours, but the surgeon came to me afterwards and said, it was very successful. We got the prostate out. We got the cancer with it. We're going to send it away. During the course of the surgery, he said, what we do is we keep you under, we take the prostate, we take it to histology and we start slicing it. We're looking for cancer cells. And we take a margin, so we go beyond the prostate. He said, we've only taken the margin on your right-hand side, not the left-hand side. I said, and what does that mean? He said, if I took it from both sides, he said, you'd be incontinent and you'd have erectile dysfunction guaranteed. He said, this way, he said, you were lucky. You might have one or the other or both. It might be permanent. We don't know. It depends on how you heal. Okay. I was very pleased about that. It turns out it was very aggressive when it was tested in histology.
I imagine they're checking for if it's metastasized as well.
Yes, they are. And they're also looking to the lymph glands to see whether the cancer is spread around your bloodstream. And he said, I don't think you'll need anything else other than that. And he sent me home. And it took about 6 to 9 weeks of recovery before I mean, I'm not young now, I'm 70, but I felt as I was about 90 when I was walking.
Really?
It really takes it out of you. And I went back for a CT scan and everything was clear. I had another blood test. My PSA now was less than 0.
Oh, good.
Which it should be. It should be. There was always some part of your body that has this prostate serum antigen in it. It never sort of goes from your body. And then comes the next difficulties. Yes, I did have continence issues. Every time I moved, every time I coughed, every time I sneezed, I peed, it was horrible. I had to wear pads where they had to cut me above my belly button to get the prostate out. Was healing quite nicely. All the other places where they stuck probes in my chest to watch what they were doing on the screens, they all healed nicely. I had erectile dysfunction. I didn't know whether that would ever come back. We went to see some specialist lady, I don't know what they call her. I don't even know what her title was. We were recommended to go to her to discuss all the things you can do about erectile dysfunction if it was on a more permanent basis. Pumps, injections, tablets. Anyway, we didn't want to go there. We thought, let's just see how it goes. And it sort of, whilst the incontinence got better over time, the erectile dysfunction did not. And I'm being perfectly honest and open with you because people that have to go through what I've gone through should know. I was given tablets called tadalafil for erectile dysfunction. It just gave me raging headaches rather than having the desired effect. And I went back to my GP. I said, I can't take these tablets anymore. Is there an alternative? They said, try Viagra. It didn't work either. And I sort of just accepted the fact that that's what my life was going to be. But although the doctor, the GP, she was lovely actually. She said, look, don't lose heart. Some stroke patients who find it difficult to talk, or they lose the side of their face, or nerves to repair. And you never know. Give it 18 months, give it 2 years before you start decrying the fact that this is the rest of your life. And actually 18 months later, it all started to come back and life is normal again, thank God, you know.
Brilliant.
And for those men out there that think, you know, it's a very masculine thing about erectile dysfunction, and many men don't talk about it, but there is hope out there. It does come back. The nerves repair themselves miraculously. I mean, you know, if you believe in God, thank you, God. You know, it was just amazing. So that was my story. And while I was recovering for those 6 or 8, 9 weeks, I started wondering, wasn't I lucky? I was asymptomatic. My doctor just happened to call me in. I just happened to have cancer. I just happened to have a great surgeon, and I just happened to get cured. And I'm forever grateful to, if you like, the great architect above, to give me that second chance and prolong my life. And I started thinking, what happens to all the other men like me? If they don't get picked up, what's going to happen to them? They're walking around not knowing they've got cancer.
Yeah.
Well, you were lucky, but you were also adamant that you were going to have the test, and so many people obviously would have left it at, oh, okay, fine, I don't need it.
I think that is actually super important, because you say you were lucky, and clearly you were to have come through it. But I think if you had accepted you don't need the test that you said at the beginning,
I think so many people would and do.
The outcome could have been so different, couldn't it?
Absolutely. And I meet a lot of men, friends, Masons, lots of people I have this conversation with where they say, I can't remember the last time I had a PSA test. I go, well, go and have one. Yeah. They say, well, I'm all right.
There is a sort of urban legend or a fallacy out there that PSA tests are not an accurate way to diagnose prostate cancer.
I'm aware of that, yes.
But I think from what you're saying is you still need to have a follow-up examination, an MRI or whatever, but they're a good indicator that you should go and do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. Look, there's lots of urban myths out there about the accuracy of a PSA test and false positives, false negatives. But guys, it's the only test. There is no other test.
Also, it's not a painful procedure, a PSA test. So
no, it's just take
so
a
why
fine
not?
of blood out of your arm and that's it. You know, it's a little pinprick.
In terms of non-invasivity, but you know, there is nothing to lose from going and doing that. It's not like the more rigorous test that you would have after a positive PSA test. Is, you know, there's nothing to lose from
absolutely
going
nothing to lose.
So Frank,
and everything to gain.
Do you think that's part of the challenge, the position you're in now, in terms of building awareness, trying to encourage other people to go and get checked and regularly get checked? Is it overcoming that sort of stigma of them not understanding what's involved in a PSA test, or do you think people are just sort of scared? You know, that it's almost, would you rather not know? You know, short term, yes, it's a scary thing, as I think come across in your story. It's a scary thing to have to confront, and the realities of your life after diagnosis. And maybe there's an element of people just being a bit scared of having to face up to that and just hedging their bets that they're fine, they haven't got any symptoms. But then, as we heard, you didn't have any symptoms.
No. Look, this is a very common issue with men and men's health generally. Yeah. Men never go to the doctor themselves under their own volition. It's always their wife or their mum or their sister tells them they should go to the doctor. We're terrible. We're absolutely terrible at looking after our own health. And I think that's a major issue. Secondly, when it comes to the prostate, men by definition are virile. Virile means that, you know, you don't want erectile dysfunction. Yeah. You don't want incontinence. And the very thought of it sort of just makes you feel you're not a man anymore. And that's really doesn't necessarily have to be the case.
It's not helpful, is it?
Not helpful at all. That state of mind has to be changed, and making men aware, which is what my principal passion is now, is just give them the awareness and also the tools to help them with the screening and the testing.
I mean, I think I'm 23. The only reason that I really know anything about this is through my studies, because I study a medical subject. But I think aside from that, most of my friends will have more or less no idea.
Yeah.
No, but there's still something
this.
you can do.
Yeah.
I tell you what you can do.
What?
You can go and talk to your dad. You can talk to your uncle.
Yeah.
Talk to your grandfather. Talk to your cousins. All of those who are over 40, and say, "Look, guys, start thinking about it now. You can educate them because you don't need to have it done now, but you know you can spread the word."
Yeah.
And Frank, I think you shared an incredibly powerful story there, and I think we were all kind of humbled listening to the experience that you went through. And now that things have improved and you're well again, you've kind of taken your experience into the education of others.
Absolutely.
And in raising awareness of others. Could you just talk to us a bit about the work that you're doing and what you're involved with, and how you're using your experience and your membership of Freemasonry to support awareness of this?
Absolutely. Let me just go back to when I was sitting at home recovering. I realised that I am a member of a male-dominated organisation. Yes, I know there's Lady Masons. And there is a set of men, all of a certain age, because the average age of a Mason is, I suppose, from your 23-year-old perspective, old men. And you're probably right, because when I was 23 and I looked at someone like me, I'd say he's an old man. And here was a set of men that they absolutely fit the criteria of needing to be tested and screened. So I decided that I'd approach, well, it was my inspector at the time, and he said, you really need, it's beyond my pay grade. He said, you need to go and speak to the Metropolitan Grand Secretary. So I fired off an email to David Swain. Yes, David Swain.
I know David. Nice guy, yeah.
And he was very, very supportive. Very supportive. He said, I like the idea of it. You're helping Masons, you're helping men. I said, I'm behind you 100%. He said, he said, where would you like, how do you want to do it? I said, don't really know at the moment, but I just wanted to get a nod from somebody and then I'll go and figure it out. He said, good, come back to me when you figured it out. So I made some inquiries. I found that there was a charity based in Essex, Essex Province, and they had done a bit of screening, but on a really large scale. Like they did a men's health day, I think it was. So it wasn't just PSA, it was heart and diabetes, etc. And I got their contact details, phoned the charity, I spoke to, he's a doctor, retired consultant, Chris Booth, and you could feel his ears pricked up. I said, I think I want to try and do something about prostate cancer in Metropolitan Grand Lodge. And he said, well, we can do screening. And he went through the whole process for me. And I said, well, that sounds really good. And he gave me some of the statistics in other places that they've done. And I started a working relationship with him. And then we had our inaugural screening session in June of 2020. It wasn't particularly well attended. I think I've got the stats here, actually. The number of people that attended the very first session was just 71.
That's pretty much peak COVID, though, isn't it? First wave of the pandemic.
That's a very good point. Yeah,
it was.
That's a challenge,
and we were all masked up, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to lose the opportunity.
But I think it's excellent. I mean, in that time, obviously, as across the world, so many medical procedures went undone.
Yes.
And went delayed and prolonged, and so many potential health risks were pushed back.
Yes.
So, I mean, to do that in the height of that was really something special anyway.
Yeah.
And what Chris arranged was that there was a fast track through to UCL.
Right.
Because he had a contact with professors there that are researching prostate cancer and are urologists anyway. So anybody went to their GP, gave them a code which the GP could use to give them a fast track into UCL if they're in the red at-risk group. So I did that in the June, and then we did another one in August, and the numbers started to increase. Then I got in touch with OMAID, Metropolitan Communications Officer, and he helped me develop the stand-up banners which we put up in the various London Masonic centres, and the awareness is picking up.
Yeah.
This year, one of the national newspapers has been doing a huge amount of prostate cancer awareness, massive. And that's really helped boost our numbers.
And thinking about the numbers of people that are getting screened, do you have any sort of rough statistics? If I have 100 men, Freemasons in a room getting screened, on average, what do the numbers say percentage of those people may be at risk?
It's quite interesting you ask that question because it's a fairly static statistic and it's currently running at 4.98%. So
which is high.
five,
It might not be a high percentage in general. That's a lot of people.
it's a lot of people.
1 in 20.
Yeah.
1 in 20, 5 in 100, and
That's a
so
lot.
I would expect after our screen of 220 men, maybe 11 people, 12 people
Wow.
will be in the red zone. That's 12 lives that could be possibly be saved.
Yeah.
That's 12 people that might have been asymptomatic. That's 12 people that might have just a minor problem, but actually they've got a major problem they didn't know about. And it says in the good book that if you save one life, you save 1,000. So far, there's been 53 people who've gone through MET. There's been 200 and something who've gone through the provinces over the last 3 years out of nearly 6,000 men that have been screened in the overall. The provinces are currently part of the screening protocol. So, yeah, that answers your question.
And if those listening out in the provinces want to take this up and run a screening session and get your support perhaps in organising that, how can they do that?
They can do it by contacting me in the first instance. With CHAPS and Chris Booth, we will find either other charities in their localities that are doing the same but on a smaller scale. They will be able to find labs in their areas that will do the blood testing and supply the phlebotomists. The process will be done by Graham Fulford Trust, which collate all the data and supply the registration. So it wouldn't be too difficult to set it up. And I have advised a couple of provinces so far. In March of next year, we're hoping to put on here at Freemasons Hall a prostate cancer screening conference. We're bringing in people that have done this in Europe, in Sweden, eminent urologists and eminent research scientists with a view, and we will invite all the provincial Grand Masters or the representatives to come along in order to make a big presentation in one hit if we can. So it wouldn't be that difficult to go into the provinces from my point of view. I think the difficulty will come is the will within the provinces that they would want to do it. It's not particularly hard work, but you do need to focus. You need to laser focus in order to make sure that you get the best awareness amongst those in the province.
So really to summarise what you're saying, you are proof really that this is relevant to everyone, whether you're symptomatic or asymptomatic.
Yes.
Across the country, there is a high enough percentage for it to be, relevant. Anyone can do this by, any province, any sort of Mason can take up this initiative in their province and get in touch with you and try and organise this. And at the end of the day, it can, as you are proof of, save lives.
Absolutely. It will come down to funding, of course, because they've either got to make a charge to the man that comes along for his test, or hopefully some charities will step in and help.
And I would just like to say that I think it would be, after such an ordeal, it would be a very natural thing to just go, wow, I'm so lucky, and enjoy the rest of your life without taking up this initiative to educate others and come on here and speak to us. Really admirable, and we really appreciate you speaking so candidly about such a serious and personal issue to you. So thank you.
We talked about this before on the mental health episode in season 1, but I just want to reiterate this point before we sign off. Pride and fear can kill. And I think we got that, and I certainly got that from the story that you shared, is that when men are too proud or are scared of something, or maybe scared of the repercussions, that in itself can lead to a worse outcome.
Absolutely.
And so for those listening, go and get that PSA test, speak to your province about setting up screening. And I think Sean's going to support us with getting some contact details out as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We'll include those for you in due course, and we'll also include it in the Frank, if you're happy with us to, share, if anyone reaches out, to share your contact details.
Yes.
I guess, Frank, to close, we are very lucky in that we speak to a very wide audience through this podcast. I'd like to end by giving you the opportunity to speak to people listening directly. And what would your message be to those people who are listening, maybe considering having a test but haven't had one yet, maybe scared of going and having it done? What would your message be to those people?
My message would be for men generally that they should consider their own health. Don't rely on your wife to push you to your GP or your sister or whoever is influential in your life. Prostate cancer does kill if it's left unabated, and if you get checked earlier, you could have a much longer and fruitful life.
Frank Tiller, thank you very much for being with us.
And thank you for the opportunity to spread it, for allowing me to spread the word.
So, chaps, how do we feel about that conversation with Frank? I mean, you're uncomfortable at times, I think, to hear the raw nature of that story, but such an important message that he had to deliver for us all.
Yeah, so impactful, really. And to hear him, I'm sure he won't mind me saying, you could certainly see at certain points in that conversation that he was a little more emotional.
Yeah.
Talking about obviously such a personal story to him. And it really reminded me of our mental health episode that we did last season.
Yeah.
That for the three of us, it was a very raw and emotional topic, and you could very clearly see that was the case for him, and the whole feeling of it, the whole setting. And I very much, I wasn't quite expecting it to be so raw. I don't know why, but I wasn't really expecting that, and it was a really nice, I think, candid and honest approach to the whole topic. And really, I think, reminded us as well that even at our age, we have a duty of care to our fellow brethren, our fellow Masons, and our family, and people close to us in that risk age group. That I think, I think it really hit home, that idea of our duty of care to each other for me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I having listened, I mean, it's obviously not the first time I've heard Frank's story, but each time it really does hit home that, and as I said at the start of our conversation, each of us unfortunately have our own personal experiences with cancer. That's the nature of what is obviously a horrible disease. And I think to hear it from Frank, who, as you say, was very open with us, and is so happy to sort of share his story in the hope that, and I think we, the same with the mental health episode, what we said, if it helps one person, if one person having heard this goes and has, a test, great. It's been worthwhile, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's certainly admirable the job that he's doing to get that message out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
5% is the number that I take away.
Yeah.
5% of people that have been screened have come back as red. And as you said at the beginning, Sean, we've got over 170,000 members of UGLE. That's about 8,500 people. Basically two whole provinces worth of Masons that may be in the red. And so if you're listening to this and you want to know more about how to get screened, or if you want to arrange a screening session, as Frank has talked to us about today, do email us, podcasts@ugle.org.uk. And I'm sure that the team in comms, Sean, will be happy to forward on details. I've certainly learned a lot. It's a very humbling experience talking to somebody who's been through that. But I think that if it just helps one person get identified as being at risk or having prostate cancer, then it's all worth it.
I think also a positive from that to take away is that there is hope as well. It's not just all doom and gloom. There is hope by doing this, that there is a future, there is a way forward, as Frank is proof of.
So do email us, podcasts@ugle.org.uk, UGLE_Grand Lodge on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook and on Instagram. Is the best way to get in touch with us and hear about new episodes as well. So from me.
And me.
We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Craftcast, the Freemasons podcast. The podcast is hosted by Sean Butler, Stephen Watley, and James Dalton. The producer is Marta Zandri, and the podcast is edited by Trisonic.